Quarterback free agency keeping us on our toes, courtesy of the transfer portal in college football. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, tracking the situation at Central Florida, which has a new quarterback in the quarterback room. Brandon Wimbush, of course, from Notre Dame, who was the starting quarterback 2 seasons ago. We got Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold Banneret, the SB Nation platform for UCF. Jeff, how you doing today?
What's going on, Mark? Good to talk to you. Never thought we'd be talking much in mid-January about this, but here we are. Yeah, quarterback free agency has made its way to Orlando.
Yes, it's made its way to college football, and Brandon Wimbush apparently was looking at Penn State, but he has made a choice to head down south. So what are your thoughts about all this?
Well, the UCF fan base is pretty excited about it. We here at UCF in Orlando, we're pretty excited about this too because it presents some options. But I think that there's kind of 2 schools of thought on it. The first school of thought is, wow, Brandon Wimbush is pretty good. You know, he set all kinds of school records at Notre Dame in that 2017 year for rushing by a quarterback, set a school record for total touchdowns with 30 between passing and rushing in 2017 before he lost the job to Ian Book. There's no doubt about how super talented he is. And for him to come to UCF as a graduate transfer, that means he's eligible to play immediately in 2019 because he does have his degree from Notre Dame. He has his bachelor's degree. So there's the one school of thought that says, yeah, it's great that that a player like Brandon Wimbush will be in the room to compete during the year that, you know, we don't know this 100% for sure, but obviously McKenzie Milton with the horrible injury that he suffered against USF, it's not likely, obviously, that he's going to play in 2019. So the coaches are not ruling it out, but you know, I mean, we all saw the injury. I mean, you know, no one on this planet is going to be surprised if he takes a red shirt for the 2019 season and tries to make a comeback for 2020. The other school of thought is, well, Wimbush, yeah, he was good for that 1 year, but he has a few limitations. It's good to have some competition in there. But what it really signals is if, you know, players of Wimbush's caliber who were playing at Notre Dame are looking at UCF and saying, that's a place where I want to go, then that changes the ballgame for UCF in terms of how are you looked upon in the national spotlight. You know, we've seen this happen with a couple guys. You know, one guy that sort of comes to mind for me is Jeff Driscoll, who transferred out of a toxic situation in Florida, went to Louisiana Tech, had a pretty good year, went to the NFL. He started a couple games for the Bengals this year. But this is a different animal that where, you know, you have a player saying, you know, I love my time at Notre Dame. I've got my degree. You know where I think I could continue my career and be successful? UCF in Orlando. 5 years ago, this probably wouldn't happen.
Interesting. So I was looking at skill set as soon as that news came down as well. And yes, when you attach Notre Dame quarterback to a transfer, that obviously signals a possible upgrade in that position. But Brandon Wimbush, highly touted player, as you mentioned, coming out of high school, much was expected of him. But in regards to his performance on the field, I don't necessarily believe that it's of the caliber that what we've seen out of UCF and McKenzie Milton, and even necessarily what Darryl Mack was able to accomplish this past. I would think that Mack and Wimbush are fairly comparable in regards to their style of play and also based on their quality of play.
Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road this spring and this summer, with Wimbush and Mack ostensibly going head-to-head for the starting job. Not to mention, you know, Quadri Jones, who is the third stringer this year, and also UCF pulled in Dylan Gabriel, very talented quarterback who broke some records in the state of Hawaii. He's likely going to redshirt as a true freshman this year, but he went to the same high school as McKenzie Milton, and UCF was very happy. Josh Heupel was extremely happy to bring Dylan Gabriel in the early signing period. But all indications point to a Wimbush v. Mack spring and summer. Mack, for all the good things that we saw this year, there were a lot of times where he did look like the redshirt freshman that he was. He got the surprise start at East Carolina or at ECU earlier this year on October 20th when McKenzie Milton was a little banged up and had a not spectacular game through the air, 12 of 20 for 69 yards, but did run the ball very well, 22 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown, and UCF got the win on the road against the rebuilding ECU team. Fast forward to the USF game when McKenzie Milton went down. Again, not that great passing, only 5 of 14. Ran the ball a few times. Really, it was a Greg McCray game out of the backfield that won the game for UCF plus the defense. But then that Memphis game, the following week, with all the stuff that was surrounding, what were we going to see from Darryl Mack? This is a huge spot to put a redshirt freshman. He was 19 of 27 for 348 and 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 4 more touchdowns, which is a school record for one game, 18 carries, 59 yards. He had some moments in that game where it was a little squirrely. He fumbled the ball twice early, gave the ball up, actually fumbled a third time, but it was fallen on in the end zone for a touchdown for UCF. But UCF still won the game. They were down big. They came back in the second half. Mack was fantastic throwing the ball down the field, and they win the game. Bowl game against LSU, bit of a different story. Now, UCF's offense wasn't on the field all that much. He did throw his lone interception of the year in that game, but that was in garbage time at the end. Not really garbage time. It was at the very end of the game in the desperation situation. Darryl missed a few throws that probably would have been probably could have kept UCF in a game that I think was a lot closer than people think. So if you're Josh Heupel and your quarterback coach, Jeff Lebby, you're going into 2019 and you're having to make a call. You got to remember that Darryl Mack was not one of Coach Heupel's recruits his first year. He's a holdover from the Scott Frost era. So maybe that plays a little bit into it. Wimbush does provide some a little bit added mobility from Mack, not knocking Mack's running ability at all because he has his own speed, but Mack's more of a power runner where he'll run you over at 6'3", 240, where Wimbush is a little bit more elusive. And he's also able to throw on the run a little bit better, which is actually something that McKenzie Milton was very good at this entire season, was throwing on the run. Mack, not so much. He's more of a step back. He's more of a drop back, make my reads, and then if something opens up, I'm going to run kind of guy. So now I wouldn't also, based on some of the reporting that we at Black and Gold Banneret have done, and Brian Murphy, who's been, around the football team for us a lot, don't rule out the fact that they both might play based on what sort of personnel packages they want to run or who the opponent may be. That's certainly a possibility. We're just not going to really know for sure until we get to the spring game, which we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but maybe we'll get a little bit of a hint of it as we from that before we head into the summer.
Talking UCF football, we've got Jeff Sharon on the line from Black and Gold Banneret. It's the SB Nation site for UCF athletics. Brandon Wimbush completed less than 50% of his passes last season when he was the starting quarterback start to finish, threw 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And again, that was the lesser part of his dual threat description. He was a better runner than thrower. Notre Dame had a fine season. It was Ian Book that bailed them out of the bowl game against LSU with a game-winning touchdown pass. And that was the precursor to what we saw this season, even though Wimbush won the job, surprisingly, during the offseason. So even after what transpired in 2017, that Brian Kelly through the spring, through the summer individual workouts, and then even through the August practice, still made the decision to put Wimbush out there. And they come out against Michigan, Ball State, and Vanderbilt and score 22 to 24 points in those 3 games, with him going 12 for 22, 17 for 31, 13 for 23, roughly. I don't want to distinguish the yardage because it's all over the place, but not overly impressive, not drastically bad. And then he lost the job to Ian Book, who, of course, took them to the college football playoff, save a start against Florida State in which Wimbush played that game against the Seminoles and looked much better. There is a thought out there that maybe he's going the route of a Jalen Hurts in regards to this is never going to be his strength. He's not picking apart defenses like Drew Brees, but he's better. He's shown us signs that he can be a capable passer and then be an explosive runner.
Interesting point about that, from 2018 with Brandon Wimbush. On our podcast, on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, we had our SB Nation compatriot Joshua Voles, who's the site manager for 1 Foot Down. That's the SB Nation Notre Dame site. He came on our podcast this week because we were, quite frankly, not really sure about, all we knew was basically, all the numbers and all the accolades about Brandon Wimbush, but we didn't know really much about him beyond that. So we had him on, and I asked him, like, what happened? How did he fall out of favor at Notre Dame? And Josh related the story to us. And I thought it was pretty interesting that, first of all, during the people look at the Citrus Bowl last year as the sort of warning sign about Wimbush, where Book came in, led Notre Dame to a comeback victory over LSU, including that last-second touchdown pass, and that was sort of the warning sign. Well, Wimbush had been dealing with migraine headaches that entire week, and he really wasn't well heading into that game. So, and then he ends up starting and kind of not playing all that well. Book comes in, he's healthier, and leads him to the comeback. So there's a little bit of, we found out that there was a little bit of a misconception about how it happened in 2018. Wimbush was named the starter, but really what Josh told us was Book won the starting job in the summer. But the problem was when Brian Kelly and his offensive coaches got together in the room to say, how do we prepare for Michigan? When they were looking at how do we beat Michigan, everything that they looked at said, we need to start Brandon, because with Michigan's front, we need to have a little bit more mobility on our hands, and Brandon gives us the best chance to win. And lo and behold, in that season opener, that's exactly what he did. In that game, he was 12 of 22 for 170 through the air, 1 touchdown and a pick. But he ran for 59 yards on 19 attempts. And Notre Dame beat Michigan in that game. Well, Wimbush being a senior, and you're heading into the stretch where you have Ball State and Vandy at home coming up after that. What are you going to do after you're a top 10 team and you just beat another top 10 team in Michigan? You're not going to yank the kid and say, okay, sit the bench, son, while we put the other kid in for Ball State and Vandy after he just beat Michigan. So now against Ball State, he had, he threw for 297, but he threw 3 picks. He rushed for -7, and then against Vandy, again, a really close game that things weren't quite in sync. Only 122 yards passing, 84 rushing. And that was when they decided to make the move with Ian Book. Now, interestingly enough, though, Mark, that Florida State game that you mentioned with Wimbush, that was senior day in South Bend. It was a little early because their last scheduled, quote, home game, end quote, was actually at Yankee Stadium against Syracuse. So Kelly decides to go ahead and start Wimbush against Florida State in South Bend. He goes 12 of 25 for 133 touchdowns, 2 picks, and he also runs for 68 yards, and kind of has his last chance to sort of take a bow before the South Bend fans in his final game at Notre Dame Stadium. So an interesting narrative, to say the least. Ian, but really the gist of it was Ian Book really won the job, but they wanted to beat Michigan first, so they put Wimbush in there because he gave them the best chance to do it. He did it, and when you beat Michigan, you're kind of like, you can't pull the rug out from under him just there. So they let him start the next few games. Book then eventually did come in, and the rest is more or less history. Wimbush, at the end of the day, he finished his Notre Dame career with a 13-3 record for the Irish. So did he have his struggles? Yeah. We know about the kind of competition Notre Dame plays. I think that there's still a lot of things that you can pull from if you're a UCF fan that has you excited about 2019, if indeed he does win the starting job.
I am not a medical expert by any stretch. I've been watching football a long time, and I don't even recollect the type of injury that McKenzie Milton suffered and what was the the aftermath of that in recovery. But rarely do we see a player have to sit out. So South Florida game was the last regular season game, correct?
Yeah, last regular season game. That was Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so very late in the season. Okay, so we're looking at roughly 9 to 10 months of recovery, less than 10 months, 9 months of recovery to get ready for even the first game without any practice. So yeah, the diagnosis is obviously not good.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone can come back from an injury of that severity, it's McKenzie Milton. He's a college athlete in great shape. He's young. He's 21, about 21, 22 years old. Like, you know, he's in as good a shape to return from that injury as anyone. In fact, on his Instagram, he just recently, in the last week, he posted a video of him actually on the incline bench press, benching some 40 pounds on that knee, which is a Herculean thing to do when you think about what he actually has gone through since the day after Thanksgiving. But he still has operations that he has to go through. His mother confirmed earlier this month that he has another operation scheduled for late January on some of the nerves in his knee. Trying to take a look at that. The hard part for everyone to understand is the injuries that he suffered are not something like, you know exactly what he did, what happened. You just have to go in and fix it, and then everything will be fine. No, you have to actually. There's a lot of things that can go wrong even during his rehab and during the operations, and even after the operations, as he heals, that can throw things off. Not to mention, you know, who knows what other minefields might be out there. You know, there could be something like an infection that he could come down with, you know, in the course of actually trying to recover from an injury like this. Not saying that could happen, not saying that will happen, but it's one of the risks that's involved with it. So you're talking about full reconstruction of his knee. You're talking about, first of all, the thing that they repaired first, that they had to repair first in the hospital that night, was a circulatory system in his knee. That's why they took him to Tampa General instead of 3 other hospitals that were closer to the stadium, because Tampa General is a trauma 1 unit. So that gives you an indication of how severe it was to begin with. They were worried about blood loss. In addition to that, you know, obviously the nerves around his knee and the ligaments and the tendons and all that kind of stuff, that all got wrecked at once. So this is a long road back for McKenzie Milton. I know that the coaches at the bowl game were, when asked about it, didn't say, no, there's no way he's coming back in 2019. I guess that's something that they're supposed to say. But deduction will tell you that it's not likely that he's going to come back for 2019. And also the fact that UCF was so hard after Brandon Wimbush to begin with indicates to you that obviously that they are assuming that he won't be ready to play in time for 2019. Which it sounds like you're breaking news on that, but you're really not. I mean, the kids, they were worried about, you know, at one point, would he manage to keep his leg at one point? You know, when you're dealing with, you know, blood loss after an injury like that, that's a really serious situation. So UCF land right now is just, you know, hoping and praying for the best for McKenzie. Who knows if he ever takes a snap again? We don't know.